Keep your wellness routine going strong all summer. Kachava's new travel packs help you stick to your daily ritual even when you're on the go. Just one packet of Kachava's all-in-one nutrition shake provides complete nutrition wherever you are, with 25 grams of protein, 6 grams of fiber, greens, adaptogens, and more. Simplify your daily ritual. Go to Kachava.com and use code FITNESS for 15% off. That's KACHAVA.com, code FITNESS.
We have the tech to get food delivered in 15 minutes, but we all have horror stories about buying tickets. The Game Time app gives fans the advantage. Get amazing tickets in just a few taps. Fees are included, so what you see is what you pay. And the Game Time guarantee means authentic tickets at the best price every time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to concerts, sports, comedy, and more with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply.
Hey, warmer from the low. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Soups with myself, Greg Oops Peters, and now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. We've got an excellent podcast for you. We're going to be joined in segment number 2 by one of our good friends, Curtis Rogers, who does such great work over at 710 Seattle Sports. We're going to turn it into a 2-part conversation with him. We're going to chat about what we all saw out of LSU this last week, because it was quite wild, quite insane to say the least. But additionally, we're going to be chatting it up with him as well about what we're seeing with regards to a lot of these NBA draft decisions. He is based out there in the great city of Seattle, and he is doing a great job covering the entire Washington sports landscape. So also have to chat with him about the Washington Cougars, what we're going to be seeing out of them in year number 1 in the new look Pac-12 as well, because, well, that's a school that we haven't really talked with him too much about. Typically Gonzaga, the Washington Huskies get all the love. So we're going to chat with him about that and so much more. Here in segment number 1, we didn't get a lot of news in college basketball, but that said, we did get a few pieces. We saw a few transfer moves made, so I will give you guys a little bit of a recap of that. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of 2 ways to be able to fire those in, and I do beg with you and plead with you to send in those Twitter/X questions. First way is my Twitter/X feed at gunit_D1. Keep in mind, letters CM, maybe does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline, and the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And conference preview podcasts are probably going to be coming in the next few weeks. We want to see a little bit more about what we're getting in terms of the roster building of these teams, and want to make sure that things are a little bit more solidified and set. And with college basketball, it does feel like a lot of these rosters are becoming more fortified, because we got a very small amount of news in college basketball on Sunday. I'll give you guys a quick recap of it. You really saw 3 main moves. Jacob Cole, he was over at McNeese last season. He has decided that he is going to be going on over to Georgia State, and he was a solid player over at McNeese. Maybe not like a complete dominator or anything like that, but he was able to put in there about 5.5 points per contest. At 6'7", really not a guy that's going to stretch the floor, pop it and lock it from 3, but he actually began his career over at Oklahoma, and he was a nice ball hawk, able to give you a little bit over a steal per contest. And under Coach Cremins, I do feel like Georgia State is on the up and up. Certainly, things did not pan out under Jonas Hayes, which I actually like Jonas Hayes as a coach, because he was able to lead Xavier to that NIT title, the last one out there at MSG as the interim coach, and then things just never really got off the ground over at Georgia State. I can sense that this team is putting a little bit more in terms of just resources and NIL into their just basketball team in general. And for Georgia State, I feel like they've done a great job here in the offseason in terms of being able to build themselves up. With Georgia State, what you've been able to see is this team build a little bit more around the guard play rather than anything else. You bring in David Thomas from Richmond, Eric Parnell was a double-figure scorer over at Fairleigh Dickinson, and then you bring in Jaden Jackson, a 12-point-per-game guy over at South Dakota State, Jacob Meyer, who was able to dole out the ball over at UAB, DePaul, among so many others. So I really like the way that they're building this up. They're going to be a little bit weak down low, but Cole should be able to help out a little bit, and I do think that this is a great move for them. Isaiah Mbeg, he was over at East Carolina this last year. He has decided that he is going to be going to Elon, and he has played in the CAA before. He was over at William & Mary, America's favorite tag team, a few seasons ago, and with Mbeg, he was one of the main facilitators for East Carolina. Not a guy that put in there a whole heck of a lot of scoring. He was only averaging about 4.5 points per game, career 28.5% three-point shooter, but that said, he was able to see some good quality minutes over for Eastern Carolina this last season, and this helps out an Elon bunch that it was a nice season for them, in my opinion, last year. year. They have been able to do a nice job in terms of being able to just restore some order with this roster. That said, they're always built around really good low post play, and that's going to be the main attraction for the team, bringing in Josh Dalton from Loyola Marymount, a 6'10" big man, Hunter Harding, a 7-footer from Indiana State. Those are your main guys. For Elon, they were pretty good with their backcourt last season. They do lose a lot of these pieces, so Mbig probably going to be looked to dole out the ball quite a bit to some solid shooters, and I think that he's going to be able to do so. So nice fit here. And then you did see Davis Bynum. He was over at Rider this last season. He was averaging about 6 points, 3.5 rebounds per game. He has decided that he is going to be heading on over to Prairie View. For Prairie View, they've done a nice job in terms of racking up some pieces here over the last few weeks. I don't know how great of a fit Bynum is going to be because Rider was on a team that really generated a lot of turnovers, and they themselves did turn the ball over quite a bit. But with Bynum, he's going to be able to help out a little bit more down low. Began his career over at Cal State Fullerton as well, where at Cal State Fullerton, he was about a 37.5% three-point shooter. I recognize it was a little bit of a small sample size, but at 6'9", he's fully capable of being able to stretch the floor. For Prairie View, you typically don't have that stretchability, and this is a Prairie View team that just in the past, they have gotten absolutely blown away and decimated on the glass. So you have a few qualms there, and now you get a little bit more size here. And Prairie View, I feel like, has done a great job adding a lot of guys that just fit the system in general, bringing in something like a Jalen Lee from Texas State to be able to help out that backcourt is nice. Sebastian Tidor from Portland State, like what they've been able to do. They also added Anthony Gauze from Charleston State a few days ago as well. So they've been able to do a nice job in terms of being able to acquire some guys, be able to have just a roster in general that I think is going to be able to do a nice job being able to put a lot of defensive pressure on teams and really generate turnovers. And then we did see one other, shall we say, under the radar move. This happened very late on Sunday. This would be Papa Amadou Kante. He was over at Pittsburgh this last season. He has decided that he is going to go to Little Rock, and for Kante, never really saw great minutes over at Pittsburgh, but I do think that he's got quite a bit of upside. He's a former top 100 recruit. This past year, he was limited to 8 games due to injury. He was averaging 5.5 rebounds per game when he was out there on the floor, but problem was he wasn't able to stay healthy. But for Little Rock, this is a team that has switched conferences. I believe they're now in the United Conference, and this is their second big pickup over the last, we're going to call it about 72 hours. Amadou Bamisil, he was over at Louisiana Monroe as a 6'7", little bit of a, shall we say, low post presence. He's going to be coming in. They also bring in Jabal Felt, who's one of the top rebounders over at Temple last season. And then in the backcourt, you bring in someone like a Joe Lyle King, who was a double-figure scorer over at UMBC, solid three-point shooter. Really like what Little Rock has been able to do here in the offseason. It's very clear that they have a little bit of a new commitment to basketball, and they've been able to do a nice job, in my opinion, of being able to set up a team that is going to be very good down low right away. So that's what we're seeing in college basketball right now. Those are the moves that we saw on Monday. And coming up next, how about if we do chat it up with our good friend Curtis Rogers? He does such great work over at 710 Seattle Sports. Have to take a look at LSU, the SEC, and these draft decisions in the next two segments with him right here on Cuz Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast.
We have the tech to get food delivered in 15 minutes, but we all have horror stories about buying tickets. The Game Time app gives fans the advantage. Get amazing tickets in just a few taps. Fees are included, so what you see is what you pay. And the Game Time guarantee means authentic tickets at the best price every time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to concerts, sports, comedy, and more with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply.
Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. back here in lovely Las Vegas for Cuts Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It is great to be joined by this man as we've got Curtis Rogers aboard. He does such great work over at 710 Seattle Sports. This time of year, he's doing a great job as the pre- and post-game host for the Seattle Mariners, but all 12 months of the year, he's doing a great job keeping his finger on the pulse of all things that are happening in college basketball. I know that he's doing a great job following everything that we're seeing out there in the Seattle and the Pacific Northwest landscape, from football, basketball, you name it. He does it. You're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X along with Instagram at A Kid From Kent, all together. And Curtis, it's always great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Greg, always happy to hop on with you. And obviously this time of year in college basketball, we're focusing more off the court, but it's always interesting what's going on around the game. And obviously some schools making headlines this time of year. Always fun to dive into it with you. And there is no offseason in college basketball anymore.
There certainly is not. And when it comes to the offseason college basketball, typically you'll get some interesting news. You'll have a coach that maybe gets out of line or something like that. I just can't remember ever seeing a week like we saw for LSU, in which you're trying to bring in multiple NBA draft picks, the former Big East Player of the Year, and R.J. Luis, who decided to go to the NBA. When you have the On3 graphics and you're seeing multiple NBA teams, that's a new one for myself. What do you make out of LSU rolling the dice on trying to bring in actual professionals that we don't know if they're going to have any eligibility or not?
Can't say that I'm surprised. It is Will Wade, after all, who has always been one of the grimiest personalities in college basketball. And that was back when doing anything in terms of NIL was against the rules in college basketball. He's obviously built himself back up, plotted his way back at McNeese State, spent a year in State. Now he's back at LSU. He's paid his dues in that way. Pretty obvious that, this has always been who he's been. This is not anything new, I think, that, Will Wade is up to in terms of just wanting to be the grimiest guy out. If it's within the rules, I think this is something that more coaches will probably try to exploit if he's able to get away with it. Really, all he needs is a judge in Louisiana to rule in his favor, and R.J. Luis all of a sudden is eligible. I think, unfortunately, this is kind of the world in which we live in college basketball, and the world in which we live, and when the NCAA is ruling on things, they really don't have a leg to stand on. So, if any of these cases get to where you need a judge ruling, there is zero chance in the world that the NCAA is going to get a ruling in their favor. So I think it's just going to be kind of more of the same with guys like R.J. Luis. We saw it last year, multiple instances across college basketball. Unfortunately, unless the NCAA actually saddles up here and, buckles up and buckles down and says this is against the rules, you're just going to probably see this more and more in college basketball.
Yeah, it is wild what we've been seeing as Curtis Rogers, who does such great work over at 710 Seattle Sports, is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And do you think that the NCAA is going to be probably trying to do some things like the 5-and-5 rule that they proposed a little bit earlier? And I know that it came out a few days ago that they're trying to make a lot of international players ineligible, and I think that those are very interesting developments, for one. And two, seems to be very, very much in response to what we saw out of LSU this last week.
Oh, absolutely. I think, honestly, my personal opinion on all this is if you have received a professional contract of any kind prior to playing college basketball, that should make you ineligible. I think you have chosen that route for yourself. I think the NCAA, college basketball, whatever level you play, D1, D2, D3, NAIA, junior college ball, those routes exist so that you can eventually go pro. They are sort of the last thing before going pro. And when you have not gone pro, then that should mean you have NCAA eligibility. If you have gone pro in any facet, whether it be over in Europe, whether it be the G League, which I count as a professional league, then I think that should mean you are out of college eligibility, even if you do leave school with a year or two left on it. I get that there are money-making ventures at the college level now, which does kind of cloudy things as to whether or not it is an amateur endeavor or if it's a professional endeavor. But ultimately, I think once you have played professionally in any facet, that should mean you are not eligible for the NCAA. Call me old-fashioned in that aspect, but that's just how I see it. I think there are going to be a lot of people that kind of push the envelope with that. And it's not just R.J. Luis, who had a really good career at St. John's, but you mentioned, like his On3 graphic has the Utah Jazz logo on it. I believe it has the Boston Celtics logo on it. Like last I checked, those are not college teams. Those are not collegiate teams at all. So it just boggles the mind that after these guys have gone pro in their respective leagues, that they're like, you know what, I'm going to give it a college try once more. It's like, no, you can go back and get your degree, but I don't know if you should be playing games for these teams.
Yep, absolutely. I'm right there with you, as we do have Curtis Rogers joining me right here on the show, and I couldn't agree with you more. I know that it's a little bit more murky with regards to some of these international guys because some of them are playing professionally at 16 years old. There's no AAU out there, unlike out here in the United States. But certainly when we've got guys that were drafted in 2020 trying to go back to college and are trying to get 4 years of eligibility, yeah, that does not quite seem right. So they're certainly going to need to iron that out a little bit. And I mean, certainly LSU has been the biggest bombshell, but just what have you made out of this offseason in general for the SEC? Because they've got a lot looming out there in terms of these NBA draft decisions with the likes of Malachi Moreno. You're able to take a look at the fact that Texas has a little bit riding on Dalen Swain. List goes on and on. Tennessee muscled up in the offseason. Florida's running it back with the team that they had 2 years ago that won the title. And I really feel like the SEC is trying to get back where they were 2 years ago when they had one of the most dominant seasons of any conference in the history of basketball.
Yeah, you can tell that in the SEC, they're kind of tired of being the second conference behind the Big Ten. And I mean, the Big Ten has the reigning national champions in football and men's college basketball, as well as women's college basketball with UCLA as well. So the SEC looked at all that and they said, you know what, we do not want to be lagging behind in any sport. And so they have decided to shell out a lot of NIL this year. Kentucky has been very busy in NIL. I think obviously Mark Pope is under a lot of pressure to deliver a Final Four contender soon in Kentucky because it's the hardest job in the game in terms of expectations and in terms of the fan base. There's so much pressure on that. He's entering year 3 here. They have not really gotten close to what, John Calipari had in his heyday. In fact, it's kind of been more of the same of what Calipari had at the end of his time in Lexington. But I look at what Florida has done this year in what they have brought back. I mean, you look at the guys that are coming back. We got Ruben Chinyelo announcing he's coming back this past week. Alex Condon, Thomas, you got Boogie Flan coming back. I mean, they have a ton of guys coming back from a number 1 seeded team last year. Like, that's really, really good. I think Florida is definitely going to be in the running for the Final Four this upcoming season. They're definitely a team that when I look at what they've got coming back, especially, just a ton of veteran guys. Chinyelo was on their national championship team. Like, that is a team, Greg, that I look at and I say, yeah, I could very well see them, cutting down the nets at some point this season. I also think, bringing Todd Golden back was big too. And there were a lot of rumors out there that he might be interested in an NBA job. It seems like the NBA coaching carousel has slowed down a little bit, especially, with jobs like Portland. They're starting to kind of have finalists for those jobs, and Todd Golden's name not anywhere near considering for that. So I think the Gators right now, Greg, I look at them and I say, yeah, this team, they're going to be right back where they've been the last couple of years as number 1 seed.
Yep, I'm right there with you. I think that it was big that they were able to have the year that they had, despite the fact that the three-point shooting was so bad. Getting back Denzel Aberdeen is going to be big because he was one of those main cogs that was gone from the team that did win the title. Obviously, Walter Clayton is not going to be walking through that door, but hey, who knows? They might be able to find him more eligibility as well. Like, my gosh. Well, the way that we're getting these guys eligible, it's just absolutely insane. But I certainly do think that those are interesting developments that have been going down, and there's going to be more interesting developments as the NBA draft decisions, they are going to be finalized within the next few days. The SEC is certainly a part of those. We're going to talk with Curtis about that, and we need to touch upon Washington State. We've talked with them about Gonzaga, Washington here in the offseason. Not too much love for the Cougs. We'll do that on the flip side right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Craig Peterson, now a part of the Beast and Family Podcast.
We have the tech to get food delivered in 15 minutes, but we all have horror stories about buying tickets. The Game Time app gives fans the advantage. Get amazing tickets in just a few taps. Fees are included, so what you see is what you pay. And the Game Time guarantee means authentic tickets at the best price every time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to concerts, sports, comedy, and more with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply.
And we're back back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peters, and now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It's always a pleasure to be joined by Curtis Rogers, who does an incredible job over at 710 Seattle Sports, looking at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. He's doing an amazing job keeping his finger on the pulse all 12 months out of the year. Additionally, I know that he's doing a great job with Seattle Mariners pre- and post-game hosting, as well as so much more, pretty much taking a look at all that we're getting out there in the Pacific Northwest. You're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at A Kid from Kendall altogether, and we certainly touch upon the SEC and LSU in the previous segment. And how about if we touch upon these NBA draft decisions that we have looming over the next few days? Because the SEC currently has a lot riding on these. Milan Mincelevic, it might be a case where he was at Iowa State. He has to decide whether he goes to Kentucky, maybe someone else, or if he goes to the NBA. But I also think that Vanderbilt has an interesting one in Tyler Tanner, because out of all the decisions, I think Vanderbilt has the most to gain to /lose, not necessarily because Tyler Tanner is the best player with a decision, but I think with how much Vanderbilt, shall we say, upgrades and how much they get back in Tanner versus what they lose is more impactful to them than any other decision on the board right now.
I think that's a very fair statement, especially looking at what Vanderbilt could potentially be over the next couple of years. They won 27 games last year. You bring back somebody of Tyler Tanner's caliber, that's a team that I look at as potentially a second weekend team this upcoming season. If they can, get the reinforcements around him. Vanderbilt has become a pretty big player in the NIL game in all sports. So it's interesting to see them kind of, throw their weight around a little bit more. Obviously, Koa Pete still wondering what he is going to do. A lot of draft prognosticators, I think, would suggest that he go back to Arizona. It's interesting. In some of the videos that we've seen from the draft process, Koa Pete's jump shot does not look very sound. It looks a lot different than what we saw from him at Arizona. His front hand is kind of like very much on the front of the ball. It's very herky-jerky. I don't know what they're trying to do with him. The advice he got from the people around him, I think it might serve him best to go back for a year. And look, if he can land an NIL deal that will pay him maybe similar to what he would get at the back end of the first round, which I think is where he's kind of mocked at, then I think it might be worth going back to school for another year. But you look at some other big names and what they could potentially do by coming back. A lot of these guys have entered the portal, and it doesn't look like they're coming back to where they were playing. But Alan Graves out of Santa Clara, he is probably going to be a first-rounder if he does go. But if not, I mean, you look at some big names. We mentioned LSU earlier in the show. That could be a spot for him. Duke, I know, has been very interested in a lot of these guys. How about Tounde Yesufu out of Baylor? He was a really good freshman. I was actually surprised to see him enter the portal. I thought he was just going to go straight to the draft, but that's another name that could be on the move with some big heavy hitters in the NIL game. So a lot of impact still very much available as we kind of await the draft decisions on a lot of these guys, which they've got to make soon, because as we know, the NBA doesn't wait around with their draft. As the end of the season comes, and they've got to figure it out. It's May 27th, so we've got a few more days. Once we get past the Memorial Day weekend, then you're going to see a lot of these guys make their final decision. But as you touched on, Craig, and as we have touched on a lot, do these deadlines actually matter? We could see these guys play 10 years in college basketball with how the rules get bent these days.
Absolutely. I was a fan of the show Whose Line Is It Anyway? When I was a kid, there was a saying that everything is made up and the points don't matter with that show. It feels like it's that way with college eligibility in this day and age. So it's always a lot of fun. It's Curtis Rogers, who does such great work over at 710 Seattle Sports, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Curtis, throughout the offseason, we've touched upon Washington quite a bit. We've touched upon Gonzaga, a lot of teams out there in your neck of the woods. But how do you look at this offseason for Washington State? Because they brought in quite a few guys via the transfer portal. They lose Mr. Break Glass in case of emergency, Ace Glass, but as we know, it's a new conference for them after 2 years in the WCC, and I think that it's going to be a really interesting year for these guys.
I think so as well, and I think there's going to be pressure on David Riley to deliver at least a winner here. He's got a great ability to find talent. He did it with Cedric Coward, who he had at Eastern and who he had at Wazoo. He ends up being a lottery pick in the NBA draft. He does it again with Ace Glass. The problem is he's not able to get these guys to stick around for much longer than a year out on the Palouse. And I think that's also a similar problem to what Kyle Smith had at the end of his tenure at Washington State. You look at the core of that team that went to the NCAA tournament in Kyle Smith's final year. Most of those guys left Wazoo after that season, either to go to the NBA in the case of like Jalen Wells, in the case of Isaac Jones, or they hit the portal. Guys like Miles Rice, who have bounced around from program to program. He went to Indiana, he went to Maryland. So he's been, on the move as well. That is the toughest thing, is to get guys to stick around at Washington State, which is interesting because it's not that far from Gonzaga. It's, within an hour's drive from Pullman to Spokane. So it's funny how the team in Spokane has no issue keeping guys around, but hopefully moving to the new Pac-12, or moving back to the new Pac-12 from the old Pac-12. They didn't really move. They just kind of stayed put, brought along a couple new friends. Hopefully that will get them a much more competitive schedule to play against. Obviously, there are bigger names in this Pac-12 conference than there were in the WCC, but I think right now the Cougs just kind of looking for some stability. I've always really liked David Riley as a head coach, especially with what he was able to do at Eastern those couple of years. I think just getting him some stability, I think, will help round out things in Pullman. But yeah, I think it's going to be another build year, and I think David Riley survives it, potentially giving him one more year in the athletic department.
Yep, and I do think that is going to be an interesting development this upcoming season, because last few years, a little bit wonky out there in the WCC, no question, but now probably want to make a nice statement here in year number one in the new Pac-12, which it very much does not look too much like the old Pac-12, but you know what? It's going to be fun regardless, and it's always fun having you aboard, Curtis, because I know that you're doing such great work over at 710 Seattle Sports. You've got your finger on the pulse of everything that's happening out there in the Pacific Northwest. Let the good people at home know what's on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, we've got a lot coming out this week as we are nearing Seahawks minicamp. We got the Mariners going on. Obviously, we are keeping our finger on the pulse of what the Cougs and the Huskies and the Gonzaga Bulldogs do, Seattle U. We also got a great conversation with Cougs AD John Harlow from last week, where kind of touching on everything within that Washington State athletic department. Really good stuff there. Check that out on the Seattle Sports YouTube page if you are so inclined. That'll be probably the easiest spot to find it. You can also find it at seattlesports.com. But Greg, always happy to hop on with you, talk some college hoops, no matter the time of year, as I'm sitting here in my car getting roasted by the sun. It reminds me we're far away from the fall and the winter time when we move indoors for college basketball season, but still always great to talk college hoops with you.
It is always great to be able to have Curtis aboard. He's doing such an amazing job taking a look at this great sport that we all know and love of college basketball, and every single time he joins me, learns such great insights. So big thanks to Curtis for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And if you do like what you're hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts: Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you, for this podcast, you do have one or two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter. So, as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. The other way, that is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast. We're up over 2,350 straight days without a missed podcast, so you can bank on that here in the offseason. We're taking a look at all the news and notes that we're getting in college basketball. Once these rosters get a little bit more solidified, I'm going to give you guys a specialized conference preview edition for every single one of the 32 conferences. Then once we get back in season, as per usual, picks and analysis on every single game, every single day. So I do appreciate you tuning in today, and I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.
Keep your wellness routine going strong all summer. Kachava's new travel packs help you stick to your daily ritual even when you're on the go. Just one packet of Kachava's all-in-one nutrition shake provides complete nutrition wherever you are, with 25 grams of protein, 6 grams of fiber, greens, adaptogens, and more. Simplify your daily ritual. Go to kachava.com and use code FITNESS for 15% off. That's KACHAVA.com, code FITNESS.
We have the tech to get food delivered in 15 minutes, but we all have horror stories about buying tickets. The Game Time app gives fans the advantage. Get amazing tickets in just a few taps. Fees are included, so what you see is what you pay. And the Game Time guarantee means authentic tickets at the best price every time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to concerts, sports, comedy, and more with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply.